Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome back into the Fantasy Headliners. Kyle here with our Week 15 Waiver Wire show. Now, probably 90% of you out there are starting your playoffs this week, or maybe you started them last week, but very few of you probably are still playing in the regular season this week. And if you are still playing in the regular season and you have a Week 18 championship, I'm going to need you to knock that crap off. Normally, we're looking at like the last 3 weeks are the playoffs, 15, 16, and 17, with Week 18 not counting towards your fantasy football league. But if some of you out there are still doing playoffs in Week 18, I'm going to need you to talk to your commissioner, smack him a little bit, get some sense knocked into him, and tell him no. Not next year, baby. But listen, for the waiver wire video this time of the year, it doesn't serve nearly the same purpose that it does in the earlier parts and mid parts of the season. All the buys are done at this point. We're not really going to be streaming anybody in the playoffs because your roster should be pretty well set, especially if you've been listening to this channel for a while now. But there are still teams out there that might be dealing with injuries, need to make some sort of a change this week, maybe looking for a high upside play to put into your lineup to kind of offset maybe some tough performances or some tough matchups for other guys. So it still is going to be very valuable for you to get ready to dominate your fantasy football playoffs. But as always with the Waiver Wire show, we start off with our segment, They Said What? And take a look at the best comments of the week. Matt and Lindsay Clausius. At least that guy didn't demand money like Ethan did. Talking about Chris Kennedy on the live show Saturday night. We gave him a call and talked to him a little bit about some DFS lineups. He was more than willing to share his time with us. Ethan from a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Ethan Turner, was like, am I getting paid for this? Greedy, just like them doctors. The Notorious Bob, gotta be honest, Dr. E, I'm dealing with plantar fasciitis, so I'm doubtful for this weekend. Listen, Bob, and all of Headliner Nation, Ethan is a doctor, but we are not going to be giving out any type of medical advice via YouTube comments. I feel like that's just a dangerous route for us to start heading, so you don't need to be sharing all of your medical issues with us via YouTube comments. Kevin Sheldrick, I will settle this right now. You're both immature. That's why I love this channel. Lots of Ethan comments this week because this also came on an Ethan video. So for Kevin, I mean, he was talking about Ethan and Jake, and yes, they're both super immature. But listen, aren't we all? Because I know that I am definitely no better than those two. And Dom Tulit, please remove any and all Raiders from your thumbnails. They don't deserve it. Sincerely, a depressed Raiders fan. All right, well, we'll do our best to make sure that we don't have any Raiders on our thumbnails the rest of the season, Dom, just for you because you requested it. Now it's time to jump into the waiver wire portion of the video. As always, this portion is brought to you by our friends over at Fantrax, one of the most customizable fantasy platforms that you can find today. If you're going to be moving your fantasy league for the next season, make sure you check out Fantrax and use code word Headliners if you sign up for an account there. So, what running backs can we be taking a look at this week? There are potentially a few, and by potentially, I mean, hopefully you've got your lineup set because this is just not good this week. All right, for the first running back, Mike Davis for Atlanta. Really, this week I'm talking about handcuffs. Like, who are guys that you can own to handcuff your starter in case there were an injury? Mike Davis is really the handcuff right now to Cordarrelle Patterson. All of a sudden, Mike Davis is getting a lot of the backup touches again, a lot of those main backup touches. He had 11 rushing attempts on the ground for 44 yards, and he had 6 targets this week in the passing game as well. Caught 5 of those for 42 yards. For me, if I'm a Cordarrelle Patterson owner, I've got to have Mike Davis on my team just in case there's an injury. Amir Abdullah, the backup now to Chuba Hubbard. Now that CMC is done for the year, Chuba Hubbard owners, you should be owning Amir Abdullah, only 8% owned right now. He's really the backup 2, again, Chuba Hubbard, and he's another piece that is needed as a handcuff. So is he going to do anything for you standalone value? No, but if Hubbard were to be injured, miss time, get sick, go on the COVID list, whatever it may be, Abdullah's probably going to be the main guy there. For Houston, a couple of different options right now for those of you in much deeper leagues, maybe dealing with some injuries or whatever. And by deeper leagues, I mean like 82-team leagues where you have to start 3 running backs. Rex Burkhead and Royce Freeman. Burkhead, the lead back now, but is David Johnson really going to be back this week? Obviously went on the COVID list, dealing with a little bit of a thigh injury, hasn't played for a couple of weeks now. Rex Burkhead, the lead guy, but Royce Freeman kind of came out of nowhere to really help out this past week, but it's split right down the middle. I mean, they split touches, they split targets, they're splitting everything. This is one of those instances, again, where it's deep leagues where you just need a starter or need a body. If that's the case, I'm going with Rex Burkhead. If you needed a little bit more potential upside in like in a PPR league, then I go with Royce Freeman, who did have 6 targets. Burkhead, I think, only had 3 targets. Rashad Penny from Seattle. Is he going to be the lead guy the rest of the year? Kind of hoping after that performance. And I'm a Rashad Penny truther, and obviously I haven't been right up to this point. But I basked in the glory that was Rashad Penny this past week. Penny going 16 carries, 137 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the ground. LA is going to be a much tougher matchup this coming week, but hopefully he is the lead back the rest of the season. Donta Foreman, very low upside, but he is still the lead running back in this backfield right now, getting the majority of the touches on the ground. And kind of like we mentioned, Jake, I know, talked about it in the video, in his running back video this past week, you know, with Donta Foreman, the reason like Hilliard, you know, those guys aren't really being talked about is because Foreman is still getting so many carries on the ground, and then those guys are just kind of filling in the passing game and other things. It's kind of a mess there right now, but if you need potentially 15 carries, that's going to be this week going up against Pittsburgh, a game that Tennessee could win. Pittsburgh kind of floundering a little bit. Nice comeback performances lately, but for me, Donta Foreman is very low upside. Corey Clement for Dallas. You got to own Corey Clement if you own Ezekiel Elliott, especially with Tony Pollard being banged up right now. Grab Corey Clement if you have Ezekiel Elliott. That's the only reason you should have Corey Clement. If you have Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard, until we know whether or not he's going to be back. And then for LA, for the Chargers, don't know what's going on with Austin Eckler quite yet. As of this recording, hadn't heard too much. Joshua Kelly, Justin Jackson. I'm adding both of these guys, but only at your peril. If you own Austin Eckler, take your shot at one of these. If I had to guess, if you put me in a dungeon and said, Kyle, the walls, they're going to cave in on you in 3 minutes if you don't tell me who it's going to be, then I'll say Justin Jackson. But really, I honestly don't know. Just Justin Jackson throughout the year has gotten the most consistent amount of backup touches. Now for the wide receivers, Rashad Bateman, 23% owned, tied with Brown last week with 8 targets, caught 7 of those for 103 yards. Comments from John Harbaugh a couple of weeks ago, like, oh yeah, we really love to spread the ball around. We really don't have a third target. And then they really locked into Rashad Bateman as the third target this week. Love it. Hopefully they keep doing it. As I talked about at the beginning of the video, maybe you need a high upside play. Donovan Peoples-Jones, 9% going up against Las Vegas. Caught 5 of his 7 targets last week for 90 yards. Good to see him involved again, and Baker going his way. Robbie Anderson at 45% owned. Buffalo's going to be a really tough matchup. Not looking at him this week, but are they going to a new commitment? Changing the play calling, changing who's calling the plays, and all of a sudden the dude gets 12 targets, catches 7 of them for 84 yards and a touchdown. Russell Gage at 43% owned, another 6 targets this past week, caught 4 of them for 64 yards, and Patterson is not getting nearly the amount of targets that he was at the beginning of the season. Cordero Patterson is really being used as a running back right now, not the receiving threat out of the backfield that he was at one point. So that's giving some newfound value to Russell Gage. Nico Collins from Houston. Look at this guy, 10 targets this past week. Maybe Davis Mills is the guy we need to get Nico Collins going. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Josh Reynolds from Detroit. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 12 more targets against Denver. That gets him 24 targets over the past 2 weeks. Hopefully this keeps up. Part of that may have been because of TJ Hawkinson missing this week. If I had to add anybody here, I'll go back to Amon-Ra St. Brown. But again, how many times have we gone back and forth with the Detroit wide receivers where it's like, oh, okay, this guy's establishing himself. and then he disappears. Josh Reynolds, since joining Detroit, is averaging 19 yards per reception. He's the big playmaker right now. KJ Osborne from Minnesota going up against Chicago. Another really good performance last week without Adam Thielen. Only caught 3 of his 9 targets, but those went for 83 yards and a touchdown. Startable until Thielen comes back. Devontae Parker, don't forget about him coming out of the bye. He gets the Jets this week. It's going to be hard to find wide receivers with more upside than Devontae Parker. Kendrick Bourne going up against Indianapolis. Unless they keep throwing the ball only 3 times a game, Kendrick Bourne should be a good wide receiver 3 for you moving forward the rest of the season. Sterling Shepard at 42% owned. Don't forget that this was a guy that was top 10 in targets to begin the year, was the wide receiver 1 established. Nobody was touching him on this offense. We got to go back to adding him and getting him back in our lineups. Jalen Guyton and Joshua Palmer are both on here. Quick turnaround to Thursday Night Football. Not sure if Keenan Allen is going to be ready to go. Jalen Guyton, he's going to be the high upside play. If you're looking for a high upside boomer bust, a guy that could snap off a huge touchdown, that's Jalen Guyton. If you're looking for a little bit more volume, someone a little bit more sustainable, that's Josh Palmer. Gabriel Davis from Buffalo. This is a high risk play, but he's kind of that 3AB option right now. You've got Stephon Diggs, you've got Dawson Knox, and then you've got Cole Beasley and Gabriel Davis now over the top of Emmanuel Sanders. Touchdowns in back-to-back games for Gabriel Davis. And Allen Lazard, I like him this week, kind of pivoting away from MVS because I like the role that Allen Lazard has this week. Now that Randall Cobb is done for the season, Lazard going to be playing more in the slot. Devontae Adams outside, MVS outside, Lazard in the slot. A lot of really good matchups, especially with his size. You know Aaron Rodgers likes that slot matchup if it's there. Robert Tonyan last year, when there was a lot of injuries, really was lining up in the slot. They were using that mismatch. A lot of the same things with Lazard. Lazard could be a really nice wide receiver 3 play the rest of the season with some nice upside. As far as tight ends goes, there's only one guy to talk about this week. Listen, if you have not established yourself at tight end yet, there is nobody on waivers that's really going to help you out at this point in the season. I just want to mention Brevin Jordan again from Houston, 1% owned, going up against Jacksonville. Mills was starting to vibe with Brevin Jordan before Tyrod came back, and then Tyrod was named the starter. Now, Davis Mills has been said that he's going to be the starter the rest of the season. Brevin Jordan catches 4 of his 7 targets for 26 yards and a touchdown. He's always going to be boom or bust. But again, if you're looking for maybe a touchdown upside play that you need, Brevin Jordan is really honestly the only guy on waivers right now that I'm looking at the tight end position. If you haven't established yourself at tight end, more than likely you're not even in the playoffs. Now, let's talk about some streaming options at quarterback. This week, I've got 3, Mac Jones, Tua, and Taysom Hill. Mac Jones is going to get Indianapolis. I'm sure they're going to throw it more than 3 times a game. Indy's secondary has given up some pretty big performances to wide receivers. Really expect Mac Jones to not really tear apart Indianapolis, but be just fine this week. May not win your matchup, but he certainly won't lose it. Tua's got a little bit more upside for me, though. He gets the New York Jets this week. That offense has really been clicking. Miami's looking a lot better. They're rolling back to kind of 500 at this point. Tua's had some really good games as of recent. Tua's a high upside play for me this week. And Taysom Hill, look at Josh Allen just ran all over Tampa Bay for over 100 yards on the ground. You don't think Taysom Hill is going to be doing a lot of the same? You don't think that the New Orleans Saints are going to see what Josh Allen did on the ground and try to replicate the same thing with Taysom Hill against Tampa Bay this week? They're not going to want to throw it a whole lot. They're going to try to control the ball on the ground, and they're going to do that with Taysom Hill. Wouldn't be surprised if he carried the ball 15 times and went well over 100 yards on the ground this week. For defensive special teams, Miami going up against the New York Jets. I mean, that's kind of a smash play at this point. Miami just under 50% owned with the New York Jets. Who are you going to get from Zach Wilson? You're going to get a guy that looks like an all-pro a couple of weeks ago, or a guy that's been basically what he has been the rest of the season. For Houston, this is a little bit of a risky play, but obviously Jacksonville not playing that well right now. A lot of crap going on in the background. Trevor Lawrence not playing that well. Houston, a little bit of a risky start this week, but if you're going to have to start Houston at any point this season, this would be the game to do it. And Tennessee going up against Pittsburgh, kind of called it last week. Tennessee coming out of the bye, getting Jacksonville, really just dominated them. Trevor Lawrence, 4 turnovers. Now they get Pittsburgh a chance to get after Big Ben. They get that pass rush going. They get in the backfield. Big Ben's not going to have a whole lot of time. As long as they shut down the plays in front of them, they're going to keep Pittsburgh from moving the football, maybe get some turnovers. I like Tennessee to do that this week. Now, for players to drop, nobody this week for players to drop. Why? Because again, at this point, we probably should have established our rosters. If you're in the playoffs, you don't have a whole lot of guys to drop right now. A majority of the players that you own are guys that you have been getting here with and you're going to be holding. So for me to tell you to start dropping a bunch of guys in the playoffs, probably not that great of an idea. But you've got to kind of make this concerted type of response on your own this week. Are there certain guys that haven't been performing? Are there certain guys that have hurt you? A majority of the guys that we would list here anyway are probably not in your lineup because they're going to be on teams that didn't end up making the playoffs. So, not going to list anyone to drop this week. And because of that, that's going to bring us to the end of our waiver wire video. Again, these videos serve a little bit of a different purpose when you get to the playoffs. But hey, hopefully you were able to find a little bit here to help you out if you're still playing this week. Do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and leave a comment down below. Who's the #1 guy that you're going to be adding off the waiver wire this week? Ladies and gentlemen, appreciate you all for stopping in. Have a great rest of your day. Peace out. Stay safe. Stay healthy. And I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.